today we're going to talk about quite an interesting and fun deck in Dragon Fusion. Now this specifically is a Dragon Tribe Fusion deck, which means we are on a lot of normal monsters. Dragon Tribe Fusion has the effect, well, if we have a face-up level 7 or higher Dragon-type monster on our field, we can fusion summon by shuffling one face-up Dragon-type normal monster from your field and one or more Dragon-type monsters from your graveyard into the deck. This turn you can only attack with fusion monsters. So this card on its own is very, very interesting because it only says we have to have a face-up level 7 or higher dragon monster. It doesn't say that monster has to be normal, and it doesn't say we have to use that monster for the fusion, which means we could have something like Metageus out and then fuse either our Ray Dragon or the Dragon from our field with cards in our graveyard. So we could fuse two Ray Dragons together, or we could fuse the Dragon with Metageus or Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius. So there is other bits and bobs this deck can do, but the primary thing we're going to be doing with this card is trying to summon out our 5-headed dragon. 5-headed dragon, fantastic boss monster, 5,000 attack, 5,000 defense, level 12, must be fusion summoned using any 5 dragon monsters. So again, really easy. We just have to fill our graveyard with as many dragons as possible. This card cannot be destroyed by battle with dark, earth, water, fire, and wind monsters. This card can only be killed in battle by light monsters, which is problematic for a lot of decks to deal with. The other possible fusion targets that we're probably going to be looking at going into is the Dragiostar. This is a tricky one because the primary way we can make this is by using our Dragon Tribe Fusion, but if we shuffle our the Dragios back into the deck, we will lose out on its effects. So if you have 2 or more normal monsters with the same name in your graveyard, send one card from your hand to the graveyard, multi-choice effect, 2 attack position monsters with the same name on your field can attack twice this turn, or special summon 2 normal monsters with the same name from your graveyard. So the primary thing we want to be doing with this is summoning out and then bringing back 2 copies of the Dragios from the graveyard. Then we have a 33 and 2 25s, which is a very strong board. Again, the best way to summon this is probably going to be using Fusion, but the easiest way to get it out is Dragon Tribe Fusion, which again can get a little bit tricky. Next up, we have our brand new monster, the Trinity Dragiostar. This is made using 3 the Dragios. If your opponent has 2 or more monsters on the field, send one card from your hand to the graveyard. Multi-choice effect, this card can attack thrice during this turn, or shuffle up to 3 normal monsters from your graveyard into the deck. Then you can destroy spell traps on your opponent's field up to the number of the Dragios shuffled into the deck. So again, we want to keep our Dragioses in the graveyard so we can use this effect, but if we summon it using Dragon Tribe Fusion, it will shuffle them back into the deck already, which is annoying to say the least. So our other fusion monsters, we have Mirageastar F. This card can either weaken all of our opponent's monsters by 1500 attack and make it up to 2 attacks, or attack directly. So that effect can be very relevant. Weakening monsters can be very good to deal with things like maximums. Next up, we have Dragiostar F, which can either gain 900 attack, make up to 2 attacks on monsters, or make a second attack and inflict piercing damage. So again, can be quite an interesting boss monster to go into. And then Sturdy Strike Dragon Metageustar F can send the top card of the deck to the graveyard to either all face-up monsters in your field gain 500 attack until the end of this turn. Also, it can make up to 2 attacks on monsters, or all face-up monsters in your field cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's trap effects until the end of the turn, and it can attack twice. So being able to give all of our field protection from traps is really, really strong. That also means we can crash our 25s into their 25s, as well as not have to care about stuff like Mirror Force. So very, very good card. And then finally, double Ray Dragons. So made using 2 Ray Dragons. If the only monsters in your graveyard are dragon and or high dragon monsters, pay 500 life points. One face-up normal monster on your field can attack twice this turn. We can also set 1 fusion from our graveyard to our spell and trap card zone. So again, very, very cool because this is a level 9 2800 monster, which is very relevant. Being able to get that fusion means we can set up a second fusion play, or we can just use its effect to make something attack twice, something like our the Dragios. So really, really cool. And a lot of the fusion monsters in here is very toolboxy because we can kind of swap cards in and out based on what we think we need. So going through the main deck, 3 the Dragios. This is obvious. It is a level 7 dragon normal monster, which means it's perfect to be used with our Dragon Tribe Fusion. It also goes into 2 of our fusions. It's just a very good card in general for this deck. We have 2 Hyozenryu. This one's a little bit more suspect, but it is again a level 7 normal dragon monster, which means we can use it with our Dragon Tribe Fusion, which is the primary reason it's in here. But we can also summon it off of something like Secret Order. We can discard it for Ship of the 7 Treasures, and we need to have as many dragons as possible because a lot of our effects, such as Double Ray Dragons and Dragiostar F, have the restriction that we can only have dragons and high dragons in our graveyard, so we are very much limited and locked into playing a deck that only has those. Next up, Ray Dragons, again, fantastic card. This is in here for a multitude of reasons. First off, obviously we can fuse with it. Second off, it works well with Dragon Tribe Fusion because we can fuse with it on the field with another one in the graveyard. And third is that it is a normal monster and we want to run 3 copies of it so that we can use things like the Dragiostar, because the Dragiostar, you just have to have 2 or more normal monsters with the same name in your graveyard. That's why we're on so many normals, because if we get any 2 of these in the graveyard, this effect turns on. Next up, 3 the Dragon. Again, really, really good. It can toolbox into our other dragon monsters, which is really, really good, into any of our fusions. And again, we can fuse it from the field, so pretty good. And again, normal monsters is what we want in the graveyard, ideally with the same name. So we're on 2 Metagears. So originally we were playing 1 Mirageus and 1 Metageus, but Mirageus, so often Mirageus ends up being a brick. 2500 attack is fine, but very, very often you come up against level 8s, level 10s, and Mirageus doesn't do anything against them because its effect is limited to only work on level 7 or lowers. So we've got this in the side deck, and we can bring this in if its effect is going to be relevant into the matchup we are in. I do think Metageus in general is a better card in more situations, which is why I've decided to go with 2 of this. But we can send a level 7 or higher dragon type monster from our hand to the graveyard. This turn, this card cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's trap effects. Also, it can make a second attack on a monster during the battle phase in which it attacked a monster. So again, decent card, can crash into other 25s, which is very relevant, can throw a load of bricks out the hand by discarding level 7s, and can protect from trap cards, which is always going to be useful. Next up, Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius. I mean, this card needs no introduction. Being able to clear a monster and then get at your opponent's life points for 2500 is always going to be really, really useful. And again, it's half of one of our fusions in the Super Strike Dragon Dragius Star F. Next up, we're on 3 copies of Mirroring Wyvern. So if the only monsters in your graveyard are High Dragon and or Dragon, so again, locking us into playing only dragons, during the turn you normal summon this card, you can special summon 1 normal monster from your graveyard face up to your field. Then this turn, this card's name becomes the same as the monster special summoned by this effect, which means we could use this to bring back something like the Dragius, which is probably the best case scenario, and then his name becomes the Dragius, which means we can then drop a fusion to combine the 2 into a Dragius Star, which unfortunately, unless we already have another Dragius in the graveyard, we will not be able to use its effects, but still being able to summon out a 3300 attack monster is not bad. We can also use this to bring back our Hyozen Ryu and then just drop a Dragon Tribe Fusion and try and get out something like a 5-headed dragon. There's a lot we can do with this card, and it is an invaluable combo piece of the deck. Next up, Mirage Dragon. This is one of the only dragon legends available to us. The other big one being Blue Eyes White Dragon, but again, Blue Eyes White Dragon isn't so good in here because we are not playing Legend Strike, because again, we can't play Spellcasters in Legend Magician, so we don't see a point playing Legend Strike. Mirage Dragon, though, is still a fantastic card. Your opponent can activate trap cards during the battle phase. This deck has a lot of ways, including Metageus and our Sturdy Strike Dragon Metageus Star, to basically turn off your opponent's Mirror Force, which is very, very good because Mirror Force is very strong at the moment. Next up, we have Double Twin Dragon. So we can shuffle 3 monsters from our graveyard into the deck. This turn, this face-up card can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a level 7 dragon-type monster in attack position. This turn you can only attack with High Dragon and Dragons. So again, really good consistency tool. The only thing that sucks about this is having to shuffle 3 dragons from our graveyard back into our deck. Ideally, we want to just keep our graveyard full of cards so that we can use things like Dragon Tribe Fusion, but occasionally we will need to just get a level 7 monster out of our hand, and Double Twin Dragon is one of the best ways to do so. Next up, we're on 2 copies of the Clone. So if the only monster in your graveyard are High Dragon and Dragon type monsters, send 1 from your hand to the graveyard. Now this effect can get annoying because of this requirement. You do have to have at least 1 Dragon or High Dragon in the graveyard, which does mean on turn 1, this card can be a bit of a brick, and you might have to use it as tribute fodder or just set it in defense mode. But we can draw 1 card, then if you have the copy or back to the fusion in the graveyard, this card's name becomes the Dragius. We're only on 2 copies of this just for consistency reasons. We couldn't really find room for it, but going for a 3rd would mean this effect would be live more often, which means you could go into the Dragius more often and then potentially make a fusion play, but I think 2 is fine. And then we're on 3 Phoenix Dragon, just a fantastic consistency tool. Send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, so you can get rid of a brick. Add a level 5 or higher Dragon type monster from your graveyard to your hand, which can include Mirroring Wyvern because this is a level 6. So we could use this, discard a card, get back Mirroring Wyvern, use its effect to bring back another high level monster. It could even be the high level monster that we discard for Phoenix Dragon's effect. There's a lot we can do with this card. Being able to toolbox our graveyard is what dragons do best, and this is just a fantastic tool to do so. Next up, 3 Ship of the 7 Treasures. Again, this is a 7-access deck. All of our high-level monsters are level 7, so Ship of the 7 Treasures is always going to be fantastic. Get them in the graveyard, which is where we want them, and draw 2 cards, always going to be really good. Graceful Charity. Again, this is a combo deck. We need to find all of our pieces. We need to fill our graveyard with pieces as well, so Graceful Charity just seems like the best legend spell card for the deck. We're on 2 copies of Fusion. We're only on 2, because a lot of the time we kind of want to be Dragon Tribe fusioning, and Fusion can get a little bit clunky. Now, it's really easy to summon out something like 2 Ray Dragons and fuse them together, but it can get a little bit trickier outside of a Mirroring Wyvern into Dragius combo to actually get a fusion out, because the dragon plus any of the high level dragons is tricky to get out. In order to get one of these boys out, we have to tribute 2 monsters, so we have to summon the actual dragon, have the fusion and the dragon, so that's just a lot of cards to get out one of these monsters, which a lot of the time I don't feel is worth it, but having access to those fusion plays is still very valuable, so we're on 2. We're on 3 Dragon Tri-Fusion. We've already spoken about this card at length, but the primary monster we want to be summoning off of this is our 5-headed dragon. A lot of decks really struggle to out this card. I remember in one of the replays that you're going to see, we played against Harpy, and we just summoned this card out, and we basically said, you have to out this. The only way I could conceivably think of to get rid of it was legend cards, so we just didn't summon any monsters to play into Icarus attack, and we were just hoping our opponent didn't draw a Dark Hole, and 5-headed dragon just gets to sit there and bully our opponent. Really, really strong card. Next up, 2 Secret Order. Again, the deck is playing 5 level 7 normal monsters, so it just is a no-brainer. We can use this to go for fusion plays, or we can use this to just push. Going into a 3500 attack the Dragius that can't be destroyed with trap cards is really, really good. Next up, Nobody Scat Thief. Again, this is a combo deck. We need to find all the pieces. We need to dump dragons into the graveyard, so Nobody Scat Thief is a no-brainer. The only problem with this card is it only stops level 8s or lowers, which our opponents might be on fusion deck or a maximum deck, in which case they will have a lot of over level 8 monsters. But still, Nobody Scat Thief, fantastic. And then finally, Magic Cylinder, the best legend trap in the game. Steals games, such a good card. Just a really good deterrent to those decks that like to summon out a giant guy and blast you. Thinking like Eternal Galactic Oblivion, thinking like Seven's Geas, just really, really strong trap. So for the side deck, we basically have all of our other dragons. These are in here to kind of mix and match depending on the matchup we are in. If our opponent is playing, let's say, Spellcasters, we might want to swap in a 3rd Meta Geas to turn off their Dark Revelations. If our opponent's playing a level 7 and lower deck, I think Harpies was one of the ones we did bring this in against. Mirror Geas is pretty good to go into them because we can guarantee get the effect off. And then Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius, again, is just kind of generically good, so we can bring this in when we want. We're on the 2 copies of Talismanic Seal Array. Again, maximums are going to be a bit of a problem, so we want ways to get rid of them. We're on the 3 Dragons Inferno. This is, again, just if our opponent's playing a very back row heavy deck and their back row we cannot deal with, we need some way to get rid of them. Then we have the Torrential Tribute, which again is really good into Harpies and maximum decks that basically turn off our combat phase. Then the other cards we'd probably put in here, which we didn't actually bring at all, would be Prisons. Prison Island is a fantastic card to stop Harpies and just a really strong card in general. So, playing this deck is interesting. Now, the deck has a lot of vanilla monsters, and sometimes you will just see all of those vanilla monsters, and the deck will feel very clunky. But when the deck does pop off, it pops off. It can be very, very explosive. If you're able to land Dragon Tri-Fusion and summon out something like a 5-headed dragon, it can just end the game there on the spot. To be honest, this deck does feel a little bit gimmicky. It kind of feels like if you don't find all the pieces you need when you need them, the deck can just kind of fall apart, and it kind of ends up being like 2500 beaters the deck until you're able to like successfully stick a fusion summon, which although isn't too difficult to do, if your opponent has answers for your fusion summons, then the deck does start to feel a little bit lackluster. Overall though, playing a bunch of dragons is very fun. I also think being locked into dragons, which a lot of the effects basically say you have to have only dragons and high dragons in your graveyard, is very cool, because I think Rush Duels feels at its best when everyone is playing all of their in-archetype cards. Now this is a dragon deck, so we're playing basically just dragon cards, which feels really, really cool. As you can see, we haven't got Legend Magician in here, which every deck seems to be on, like 3 Legend Magician and at least 2 Legend Strike at the moment. And this is just a deck that's a bit refreshing. It doesn't have to kind of rely on those cards because it can't, because it will just turn the deck off. So I think, again, being able to play a deck that is entirely monotype is really, really fun. And it kind of is the spirit of Rush. And I think, if nothing else, that's what makes this deck really cool. On top of that, who doesn't love dragons? Who doesn't love just summoning dragons? Summoning dragons is really cool, really fun. Summoning out a 5-headed dragon with 5000 attack, that's great. But let's fire in some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.